And we're back for another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCourcy here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on, man?
Trying to come up with a plan.
Well, we had a plan. It was 52 episodes in 52 weeks.
Different plan. Plan for a startup, dude.
Well, that's all right.
Yeah. So with that, I've come up with some tips. I think
Absolutely.
You have as well.
Absolutely.
This is part 8.
Excited to continue the 52-part series. This is fun.
8. We're on 8. Is that an 8? That's a 5. That's a 4 and a 4, or a 5 and a 3. But we're on 8. So yeah, I'm having a hard time counting today. Maybe we should talk about that. And by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day, because that's the day that this is coming out on the podcast. Some people are joining us on the live stream. So, there's a whole lot to talk about when it comes to planning for a startup. Before we do that, just a quick reminder that today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io. We can help you build a software team quickly and affordably, and that might be part of your plan. So we could talk about that as well. But overall, as we begin part 8 of 52, I think people that have listened to us on this show a lot know that we are for some types of planning and hate other types of planning. What do you want to say before we dive in, Mr. Watson?
The plan is there is no plan, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
I think the plan is that the plan is wrong, and that's one of the things we'll talk about. And, it's the story of the shopkeeper that spends all of his time, so much time cleaning the shop, and becomes so obsessed with cleaning the shop, he forgets to open the doors.
Yep.
And that's what planning can do sometimes when it comes to an early stage business. Now, overall, when it comes to the plan, we're going to go through some do's and some don'ts, and also list some of the common pitfalls that just kind of come up in the planning process. Matt, I'd like you to be the lead off here. So why don't you dive into the list for us? Tee it up for us, baby.
All right. Well, I think the first thing you got to do is just get ready to embrace the startup life, right? You're going to have to learn a lot of new things. You're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to sacrifice some personal time, right? Like you probably have a full-time job or something else that you're doing, and now you've got this side hustle, and it's going to chew up some of your personal time. So you're going to have to make some time for it. You're going to have some money to invest in it too. I mean, for simple stuff, like even could be just business cards or a website or, just simple stuff. It's going to take at least a certain amount of capital just to get started. So.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the plan itself, and the reason that we kind of poke fun or poke holes in plans is when you're taking a foray into something that you haven't done before, it makes it impossible to create a real plan. And the reason for that is you don't know what you don't know until the moment you realize you don't know it. And I think if you have experience starting a business, it becomes remarkably easier to create a realistic plan, because you're going to probably leave out less one-time things. I think when it comes to overall plans, and my experience in the past is those are the things that kind of grind on you, both mentally and on your clock, because you get stuck doing like all this crap that, you didn't think about or you didn't need to do. Or when it comes to the finances, things you need to buy that you hadn't thought about.
Yep.
Or, all of it. And the thing is it becomes very easy to get stuck in the sidecar of planning rather than the race car of startups that you want to be in. And, that's some of the things we'll talk about. When it comes to creating your plan, I think one of the important things to do is, okay, so there's things that you have to that you should focus on. There's things you want to focus on. And then there's things you don't really even want to do, but you have to.
Yep.
But one of the things that is important early is, how are you going to validate your concept? How are you going to create? How are you going to, you're going to be seeking resources or users or whatever. So how do you validate? And Matt, when you think of like validating what you do, and we hear that term a lot, what does that mean to you?
It means meeting with your potential customers more than anything. What you don't want to do is just meet with your friends and family who are all going to be like, yeah, that's a great idea, man. That's awesome. And they don't know anything about the problem you're trying to solve or the customer that you're targeting, right? Like, you've got to go meet with potential customers and get feedback from them. That's the first priority. When I started Stackify, I reached out to people on LinkedIn. I went and met with the IT directors and stuff like that at some local companies, and just hey, can I buy you lunch? Can I, buy you a cup of coffee? Just want a few minutes of your time. I got this new company, and some of them are, some of those people are a little more innovative and on the leading edge. And like, cool, yeah, I'd love to hear about that. That sounds great. And then some people aren't into that. So you just got to chase people around till you get some people that'll talk to you.
You can overcome those objections with volume, meaning like ask more people.
Yep.
Just what you don't want to ask 3 people, and then if they all say no, assume everyone's going to say no, because that's not necessarily the case. I think overwhelmingly entrepreneurs have this built-in desire to help other entrepreneurs because we've been there, and the older I get, the more help and advice that I offer those with less experience, because I remember how meaningful it was, and to get advice from others. And I still am a huge supporter of those people that gave me advice along the way. So you can create your own little angel network that way. And, and these people will follow. They kind of want to see if the advice they gave you was any good on some levels too.
Well, especially when you reach out to them, try to relate to the problem as it helps them, right? Like, hey, I bet you have this problem. This is the problem I'm trying to solve. I'd love to get your experience, right? Just like if somebody came to you, other Matt, and said, hey, I know the easiest way to find unlimited .NET developers in Cebu, and they'll work for nothing. You'd be like, sure, love to talk to you, right?
Yeah,
like,
I want to hear what you have to say.
What do you have to say, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's if you can serve it up in something that interests them, right? Not like, hey, I just want to meet with coffee. Like, give them a reason, get them excited to meet with you.
You did that on purpose. I hate the coffee invite. The general coffee invite sucks. Like, it really does. Like, if you want to meet with me or talk to me, don't just be like, hey, I'd love to sit down with you over coffee and talk about what you do. That's like an instant no for me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what is my purpose of going and doing that? So by the way, Matt, no one, when they address me, no one says, hey, other Matt.
I know.
That's not, I don't ever get an email that says, dear other Matt. I probably will now. Now, one of the things in just basic startup planning is giving consideration to how you want to set up your business. And look, neither you or I are legal professionals. I'm not an attorney, but there are a heck of a lot of them out there that can help you get started. And when we say set up your business, you want to offer protection for yourself. You can even pick up a copy of $1 Million Bedroom, because there's a couple pages in this about this subject. The one thing I know you don't want to do is be a sole proprietor, because all of the liability and all of the crap has a direct line of sight at your personal everything. So, when it comes to whether you're going to be a corporation or LLC or some of that, you can seek legal counsel, and then there's all kinds of stuff online that'll help walk you through it. Although, like
LegalZoom, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. But and I've had issues with that in the past too, though, because those are like highly boilerplate.
Yeah.
And they'll set up an entity for you, but then you just kind of get a boilerplate everything after that. Depending on how you perceive the complexity of the business that you're trying to set up, you may or may not want to choose to speak to an attorney, and they can do it for you. It's honestly, it's not a whole lot more expensive than something like LegalZoom. And they can give you better advice about, like, what do you want to accomplish? If you, there's differences between owning a corporation and an LLC. And that's not what we're going to talk about in this episode. Because, like, once again, we aren't the best people to advise you on that. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, all the businesses that we own, including the business we own together, Full Scale, are LLCs.
Yeah.
But one of the things is, if we were to take in funding from institutional investors, they'd want us to change that.
Yeah, because they don't want K1s.
Yep. So
I think the other topic here to cover a little bit is, when to do this, right? Like, if you have a startup idea and you want to start working on it tomorrow, setting up an LLC is not necessarily the first thing you need to do, but you definitely need to do it before you start having customers or probably have a whole lot of expenses or liabilities, hiring people. I mean, but you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the very first thing you do.
Yeah. And now in that same boat, it is something you want to do when you begin to have true partners. Like,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing. And if you're going to take in money from someone else,
Yep.
also a good marker for when you might want to do that. And, those are some of the things that make sense. And you're right. You don't need to, because one thing is, okay, you'll have to pay to set it up, whether it's through an online kit or a legal professional. You also have to pay to shut it down. So make sure you want to do it before you set it up, or you're going to end up with like a bunch of lingering things that are out there. And by the way, it's harder to shut. It's more of a pain in the ass to shut them down than it is to start them up.
Well, and you're really right about if you have business partners and co-founders, part of it too, because that's some of the stuff you have to get figured out up front, is who owns what and stuff like that. So last thing you want to do is wait till the very end and then try and do all that, and then you're not in agreement on it.
Yep. Yep. One other point that goes with that in the planning is I highly recommend if you have partners, this is if you have partners. If it's just you, then this doesn't really matter that much. But if you have partners or possible investors, you need to start thinking early about roles, like what you can do and what you can't do, and like certain things that set up parameters. And those are classified under your operating agreement, which is planning for how you're going to operate the business. And keep it simple. Don't create these like super majority things where you need 5 people to vote to see if you go buy office supplies. So good fences make good neighbors. How about having patience? Should we plan to have patience?
That's one of the hardest things about a startup is everything is new and it can be very frustrating, right? You want to get things done quickly and you want to meet, you want to validate your concept. You want to get the product done. You want to find your co-founders. You want to raise capital. Like you want to do all these things as fast as possible, but all of these things end up taking 2 to 3 times longer than you think usually. And you got to have a lot of patience. You're going to learn a lot of things. Things are not going to go the way that you plan them to go. You're going to have to make, what do you always say? Jump and build wings.
Sometimes you have to jump and then build wings.
Yeah.
Now, the important part to note is that you need to have the material to build the wings, because trying to acquire the materials on your way to the canyon floor, that's one other thing to do while you're trying to build the wings. And so, that's basic resource planning. When we talk about patience, some of that is you have to be ready. I think one assumption that you can count on is that you're going to have to learn a lot of new stuff. You're going to have to adapt to certain things. And I can't tell you what that list is because it's different for everyone, but you are going to have to learn how to do a lot of stuff. I don't care how much experience you have. A new business always comes with significant learning curve and
no owner's manual.
There is definitely no owner's manual. And I think people have asked me in the past, like, what's the hardest thing about a startup? And I say that they don't come with owner's manuals. And you should be creative as you keep moving forward and you're improving and adapting, create that owner's manual. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. It can be basic. But if all of a sudden you bring in resources or your business begins to grow quickly, that's something that you're going to end up having to do. When I say owner's manuals, I'm just talking about basic stuff like when this occurs, we do this, or basic rules, and there's almost an unlimited amount of resources online where you can grab and pull a lot of that stuff without having to dream it all up yourself. So I think that's it's not on our list, but I think that that's probably a good part of the plan. A planning tip is ask Google.
Ask Google everything.
Yeah, I've learned almost everything I know by asking Google, which is sad because that means I probably didn't learn much before Google came out. but I'm willing to own that. So this next one I think is really important, and plan on looking for help when it comes to setting up the business. And I don't mean just the entity of the business. I mean all parts of it. Like, yeah, if you're going to have employees right away, and like use like Paychecks or ADP or something like that. Gusto, there you go. Should bring up those that have sponsored us in the past. But there are a whole lot of platforms and people and service providers that can help you set things up at the business. I'm talking just fundamental gears. And the reason that that's important is that allows you to focus on traction, sales, and getting your minimally lovable product out to market.
Yeah, another good example of this might be setting up your website and some other basic marketing stuff, right? Like if you're not an expert at that, you don't want to spend weeks of your own time doing it if you can pay somebody else to do it for a low cost. Now, you got to have the capital to do it, or otherwise you're forced to spend all your time on it.
And now look, the more, especially if you have other employees or things that are burning the burn rate. So planning your burn rate. Matt, what's a burn rate?
It's the lack of profit on a monthly basis. It's the money you're losing.
And the burn rate, well, a little more simplistic, is the amount of cash that you have on hand divided into the number of divided by the number of months until you run out of it.
Yeah.
So if your burn rate is currently putting you at 4 months till you run out of cash, I mean, know that, understand that, and plan for that. And that's difficult. I think that's where plans fail, though, because they're overly optimistic. And once again, we're not trying to scare you away from starting a startup, but that's where a lot of people fail, is they just assume everything's going to go right. You're almost better to make the other assumption and be pleasantly surprised when everything doesn't go wrong. It's a safer way to plan. And it also forces you to be aggressive with things like generate revenue, validate the product. Nothing's going to help your plan look awesome and be believable and get people behind it more than traction and revenue. All right. You want to take the next one, Matt?
Yeah, I think the next one is one of the most important things, and that's identifying mentors. And we talked about earlier, meeting with potential customers. Some of those could end up being one of your mentors, but especially if you're a new entrepreneur or going to an industry you don't know, find mentors that can help guide you, are really, really valuable. So, and a lot of times you can find those through your local network or startup communities.
The first time I ever met you face to face, it was a mentoring breakfast of sorts. You sat down and gave me some advice about Gigabook. I remember you told me too, because at that time it was $8 a month per user. And you basically said you're going to have to stack up a lot of users at $8 a pop.
Yeah.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. And it was true. It was true. I mean, and that's one of the things that, like you look at, well, that changed some of the approach later, because we ended up with some enterprise and custom type users later that pay thousands of dollars a month and not just $8.
Yep.
Because and the reason that some of that matters too is that's one relationship and one client to service, not 150.
Yep.
And that's where that would really water you down. Also, it changes the approach of investors. So, when it comes to identifying mentors, that doesn't have to always be people that are in the industry. I mean, the first place to look that's probably right in front of you is your own personal network. And I think you can ask with kind of a dual approach, in that, say, would you be willing to talk to me, or do you know anyone else that would?
Mm-hmm.
So ask for help. Ask for help, and you will likely get help.
All they can do is say no.
All right. So now when you create your plan, I kind of mentioned this at the top of the show. Look, it's wrong. Your plan's wrong. That's one thing I've learned, is the plan is wrong. Why? Because it changes. And business plans. So look, no one's going to want to read your 60-page business plan
Nope.
Investors don't, and they want to see like a one pager, like, so, don't spend all your time making a overly verbose business plan, because it's going to change so rapidly. Now, there is part of that I do think you should take a little more seriously than the rest of it. And that's the financial part of it, because you got to get a good idea of what you might be in for and when you might need to add expense, how long it's going to take you to run out of money. I mean, a whole lot of stuff with finances that matters, because the rest of the plan is shaped by that in many ways. But, overall, like, I don't know, I see a lot of people spend a lot of time on that 50, 60 page business plan. And the likelihood is you might be the only person that ever sees it. So do it to the point that it's useful for you, but know that the other people that want to get involved or invest in your business are going to have the same opinion that I just stated, and that plan's probably wrong.
It's based on nothing but assumptions for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So most of those assumptions are going to happen very differently than what you thought.
Now, one part of your plan that you can spend, and I do recommend spending or focusing on, is refining that brand message. What do? Dude, you know how many people I talk to that can't tell me what their business does and do it in one sentence?
People always really struggle with that elevator pitch. And even to this day, I would say it could be something I struggle with for Stackify. If it's another software developer, it's a little easier. But if you're talking to somebody who's not in tech, you got to pitch it a little differently. So
I made an elevator pitch for you because people ask me what Stackify does all the time. And I say it's code that checks code. It's true. I mean, on many levels, I know but that's part of it. So, and look, you always want to make it shorter. Full scale, we help people build development teams quickly and affordably. That's the umbrella policy or brand message that we have, because that's how you get someone's attention, and that's how you can make people go numb. When you're on your third minute of talking about what your business does, like, well, that's wildly inefficient. And it also says that you might not know what your own business does. So, you mentioned practicing that elevator pitch. If you think you're going to find investors and you're going to want customers, that's back to that same brand message. Like, practice it. You don't need anyone else. Like, do it at home, do it in your car. I've done that a lot over the years. And, I don't drive to work every day right now, but when I did, I would practice stuff in my car all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always thinking about it.
Is that how you do it, Matt? Do you drive around and talk to yourself?
When I'm walking to my office down the hall, I think about my elevator pitch.
So your kids and your wife think you're crazy.
Now,
mine don't. They're used to that.
Maybe what I need to do is install an elevator in my house.
And then throw baseballs into it so you have an elevator pitch.
Yeah, there you go.
I like it. I think that's a smart plan. We should draw that up. All right. So, and another part of planning is, and the prior episode, the one last week that you hopefully just listened to, was about some tips for finding and looking for co-founders.
Yeah.
But that's something you should consider. I mean, and don't just assume that you don't need them. And don't be closed-minded and say you don't want them. Like, these are people, like, they can be very powerful if done well.
Yeah, partnerships are always tough. They can be really good or really bad. And, when you're first starting out, if you can find somebody that is an expert in industry or has the right connections and all that kind of stuff, it can really add fuel to the fire. It can be the difference of your business going nowhere or going big time. So
I'm going to take a quick pause because we have a really valid question from live chat, and then someone's Hector Crespo is asking, "Hey guys," he's basically asking, "What are resources for building a business plan?" I love liveplan.com. It's simple, it's easy. The thing I like about it is that it makes creating financials way easy. And I'm old enough that they didn't have LivePlan. and platforms like that when I was in the last college that I went to. And there was like, you would take a whole semester course on how to do the financials. And then it was still really hard. Things like LivePlan, I don't have any vested interest in suggesting it other than I've used it quite a bit.
Me too.
It really does make it easy. And you can also adjust it easily. So if you're keeping up and building the plan, it makes it, if you're going to use something like LivePlan, and once again, I have no commercial interest in pushing that, but it's actually built for you to keep up with it and make adjustments and literally have a live plan.
Yep.
So I think it's 20 bucks a month, and
it's cheap.
$20 a month, man, super easy. And it also like spit out different things you need, like one pages and executive summaries, and makes it simple.
It makes the financials easy, but it also does some of the other stuff you just mentioned. Yep.
So we're talking about considering, the who. We mentioned co-founders. I think the earlier you can start building lists of potential investors, the better off you are.
Well, and the first thing is figuring out from your business plan if you need investors and how much money you're going to need to raise, or will you need to raise, money now or later, or, figuring all that out. And sometimes you're just never going to know that, but you may know it's like, oh, to get this to scale, like we're going to have to raise money because we got to build a manufacturing facility or whatever. So,
dude, there's so many episodes of Startup Hustle that are built around investor stuff. And some of the things we have, on our list here is considering grants and incentive funding, looking at accelerators. Do you need to raise capital, as Matt just mentioned, and to try and figure out what questions investors will or would ask you. I don't think you need to get outside of Startup Hustle to get a hell of a lot of good advice about that, because we've had so many episodes from all types of alternate funding, startup grants explained, like all of it. It's there. And we've named over the last 500 plus episodes, we've been very intentional about the way we named our episodes to make it easy for you to go find exactly what we're talking about in those episodes. So scroll down the feed and I'm telling you, they're in there, and some really, really good info, especially on the investor side, people that actually make institutional investments flat out talking to us or me or Andrew or Lauren about what they're looking for. Yep. And they all say something similar. So listen and learn. There's good stuff. So Matt, what's a go-to-market strategy?
Well, it's how do you acquire customers, right? And you also got to know who is your target customer. So, and a lot of this shapes your product offering, right? Like, for example, you want to start a cleaning service. Are you going to clean one house? Or are you going to clean stadiums, an office building? Are you going to sweep parking lots? Like, what are you doing, right? And depending on the type of service you offer, completely changes your go-to-market strategy, right? If you're trying to sell to a commercial building versus a residential customer, completely different go-to-market strategy.
And by the way, Hector Crespo, you're welcome. Glad to help. Thanks for asking a great question. I'm glad to answer that. So now, you talked to go-to-market strategy in our episode in this series about why startups fail. It's a poor product market fit was the top reason. Obviously, they run out of money. Okay, so we eliminate that, and then that is like I've looked at data and polls and like actual science behind that, and it was like 1 out of 3. So another thing with your go-to-market strategy is you're forcing that issue. You're forcing yourself to focus on traction, to focus on selling. Nothing validates your idea more and gets people interested in what you're doing more than signing up users or gaining revenue, preferably both. And, having a strategy for that. If you want me to invest in your business, I'm going to ask you, what's your path to revenue? It's almost it's a guarantee that some of my earliest questions are going to be exactly that. So when it comes to a go-to-market strategy, another thing, so you've started making a list of possible people you could as co-founders, possible investors. How about business partnerships or places like, who are your clients? That's part of a go-to-market strategy, is who are we going to do business with? Because it really, at first, and I'll use Gigabook as an example, I said, man, anyone could use this product. And then when we created our go-to-market strategy and I had to sit down and refine advertisement, I said, oh man, anyone could use this product. Yep. And so it wasn't a good thing. Like, I mean, it's the total addressable market. If it's everyone, first off, there's already someone else out there addressing the market.
We have this issue with full scale, right? You're like, hey, we can provide software developers for anybody who needs software developers. And there's like 1 million companies in the world. It's like, okay, wait a second. Who are we going to call? which one are we calling first, right? Like you gotta pare it down. So when you talk about go-to-market strategy, especially when you're early on and you're trying to figure out how you're going to get traction and grow the business, I really recommend a book called Traction, and it's all about traction channels. And I want to list them out super fast. And partnerships is one of them, but there's a bunch more of them. So like blogs, publicity, unconventional PR, which could be like weird advertising stunts, search engine marketing, social display ads, offline advertising, which could be billboards or radio, TV, search engine optimization, content marketing, email marketing, viral marketing, engineering is marketing, which is something Stackify uses, business development, partnerships, sales, affiliate relationships, integrating to existing platforms, trade shows, offline events, speaking engagements, community building, advice. Like there's all these different things. You can't do all of them either. So you got to pick one or two of them. And that could be your go-to-market strategy, right? For certain industries, things like trade shows before COVID anyways, were super valuable. I know people that their whole business actually revolves around a trade show every year. Your industry and what you do is completely different. At Stackify, we rely a lot on content marketing. But again, that shapes who your customer is too. At Stackify, we have a lot of small customers. You don't do content marketing to usually attract C-level executives. If you want to target C-level executives, you might be, a totally different model. So.
Yeah, speaking of seeing and then doing, we started a TV show, Startup Hustle TV, and it's a look at entrepreneurship through the lens of an entrepreneur. And come check out what we're doing on YouTube. But we get a lot of compliments and a lot of people interested in what we're doing because guess what? We're telling you, we're showing it to you like it is. Wins, losses in reality. And some of that is by the time this episode comes out, there will already be episodes live that show our cast members working on content marketing. And that's a big part of things. And, the thing I like about content marketing is anybody can do it. It can be paid for with your own time. But the flip side of that is it takes time or you have to pay someone else to do it. So you can't no one just has 500 blog articles that they publish. You got to build that stuff up over time. No matter how many visits do you get a month to Stackify from blogs that you've published over the last 3.5 years?
It's close to 1 million visitors a month on our blog.
What would 1 million visitors a month do to for your business, people? And those are people that you're not paying for those 1 million visits, right?
Nope, it's all organic from blogging and search engine traffic, mostly Google. Yep.
And how long did it take to build up that library?
It took a year or two to get it going. I mean, Full Scale's done the same thing, right? That Full Scale gets quite a bit of traffic and it's slowly growing, right? Keep creating more content and.
Yeah, and so that's what Matt and I, you'll hear us refer to as evergreen content, meaning like it's like a pine tree on a mountain. It's green all year round, and it just kind of stays that way. And I think overall, when it comes to you can never start too early with that part of your plan. So, and another thing too is you got to figure out what works. So one thing about content marketing is it's not fast. Meaning you just don't, I'm going to start my content marketing plan. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, ba-bam, 1 million visitors a month. No, that number creeps up and you will find out what works, what doesn't. And, Matt, in that book, Traction, which is a great book, and I recommend checking it out as well. You basically just listed that was a hype plan. Like, how are you going to hype a business? Like, that was a rapid fire list of ways to get people to know what you're doing. Now, back to a prior item on the list. If you don't have a refined brand message and an elevator pitch, you're not going to be able to create content. You're going to be in front of a camera or behind a keyboard going, we do a lot of stuff for clients and they like some of it. It's like, come on, you gotta kind of get, and one thing too is while something like a podcast is intentionally long form, like this is modern talk radio. By the way, you can start your own podcast and have it on Apple Podcast in 2 days if you sit down to do it. But if you're making video and doing other stuff, especially impression-based ads, meaning like social media, keep it simple and to the point. Like the ad that drove this podcast onto Apple's top entrepreneurship charts was literally just a picture of a microphone, our logo, and it said a podcast for entrepreneurs. Because that's what it is. Simplify the message. Don't make people guess. You don't win at the image. You win at the click and whatever happens when they arrive wherever it is that you want them to arrive to. Okay. So plan on focusing on solving the problem that you intend to solve. Like that's how your business makes money, because you solve a problem. And your plan needs to revolve around getting you or your team or whoever centric on that.
Well, and one of the things we've talked about in our previous episodes many times is you got to figure out a problem to solve that people are willing to pay for too, right? So you talk about your business model. If your go-to-market strategy and your product revolves around consumers who don't pay for anything and it's all supported by ads or, weird affiliate relationships or whatever, that might be the case, but you've got to understand that and understand how you get to revenue. Versus if you're selling a B2B, it's a business to business product and people are willing to pay you for it, then that's a totally different, product and go-to-market strategy. So you've got to understand if it's, B2C or B2B, is it ad driven, like all that stuff. You really got to understand those things.
And that's where the pivot can change that too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen people shift companies. That happens all the time. They were aiming, so B2B, business to business, B2C, business to consumer. You're one or the other. And then other things too is defining what it like. Are you a service company? Are you a SaaS company? I mean, some of that little stuff matters, especially when you're trying to recruit people to come with you. And that's another thing for planning is what kind of help do you need? You could, okay, I need developers. That's a shitty answer, Matt. Like what kind? What price? For how long? When do we need them? Warren Buffett is pretty famous for saying that 9 women don't make a baby in 1 month. You can't just throw manpower at everything. Like if we're digging a hole in my yard, 9 people will probably dig it faster than 1. But if we're talking about how to start a tech company, Matt, do 9 developers always build it faster than 3?
No.
Why?
No, not at all. Well, I mean, 9 people can't type code in the same file and you just have more meetings and bureaucracy sometimes of just, it's just like having brain surgery. You want one doctor with the steadiest hands and that's everybody else get out of the way, right? Like some things don't scale that way.
All right, this is something that's got to be part of your plan. Who's your competition? What do they do? And what are they doing?
Yeah, this is a big one. And it can be really problematic for some people too, of being too obsessed with their competition and thinking that like, oh, I'm gonna do the same exact thing that Apple does, but I'm gonna do one little thing different. Like that's not enough of a difference. And you don't want to just copy somebody else's product either. It'd be like, take Apple, for example. Are you going to out Apple? Like, no. Good luck, right? You've got to create something new and unique. If you're not creating something new and unique, then why would somebody buy your product compared to the already industry standard, best of breed product that exists? There's got to be something unique about your product. And it can't be like one gimmicky little thing. It's got to be like 10 times better, or it's got to be a very specific niche audience that, when they see your product, they know immediately like, oh, this was built for me and I need this thing. You've got to really focus on the customer you're trying to solve, the customer you're trying to sell to. But you got to be careful about your competition. Some people get really infatuated with their competition and obsessing about it. But you really got to find your own, they call it the blue ocean, right? Like you want to find your own empty blue ocean you can go swim around in instead of the shark infested red ocean.
So on the flip side of that coin, Matt, you can certainly see what your competition does to market, promote, develop business, and copy the shit out of that if you want to, people. Like, it doesn't mean like steal their ad and use the exact same words, but see what they're doing. Because if you see your competition like all the time on Facebook ads, it's okay to maybe assume that those may be effective for them.
It may work. Now, there's one caveat to that, right? So take Stackify as an example. Our average customer pays us, say, $5,000 a year. So if I advertise on Google AdWords, my average customer is going to pay me $5,000 a year if they convert. Well, one of our competitors, they might sell their product for $50,000 a year. You know what that means? They can afford a lot higher pay-per-click budget than I can. So I can't outspend them and rank well in AdWords because they can just throw more money at it because their customers pay them more and whatever. You see my point? So it's also could be really difficult from that perspective, but you're absolutely right. Understanding what your competitors do and maybe what works for them. One of the things that we did a lot in Stackify's content marketing strategy is looking at our competitors' websites and finding content that ranked really well on their site, and then like making our own version of it, but making it better. Figuring out certain keywords that they rank for and figure, okay, how do we steal some of their traffic on those keywords? We know people are searching for those keywords. So
there's a gazillion tools that'll help you figure that out too. There really are. These same tools, these SEO type tools, they'll even tell you what the keywords are that your competitors are using in advertising, because Google sells that info. And that's what kind of like what Matt's talking about. I'll look at stuff like that. And okay, so this is where our content creation becomes centric around this. Sure. And it also is a good indicator of like what in this day and age with search engines, people just ask them questions, so absolutely. What are those questions that they're asking? So Matt, the average full scale client spends over $10,000 a month. That means we get to do all kinds of wild stuff, like start TV shows and do a podcast and have sweet and greet. We might get to do those again this year.
Well, and to that point, right? How much money your customer spends dramatically changes the type of advertising and marketing that you do. If your customer only pays $8 a month, that's pretty hard to have an advertising budget and return on that. But if they spend $10,000 a month, it's a lot easier.
Well, and it's also about how long will they spend it.
Right.
And and every business is different. So like way back in the day, which was like when the internet had just come out, Matt, I sold pianos. You sell a piano to someone once. That is a product that lasts like 70 years and is often handed down. And even a digital product, like people buy it and they don't just come right back. Now that's a completely different approach to selling. Now in that same vein, you only need to have a couple people come buy them because they're expensive.
Yep.
And so like for us, like in some of the stores that I worked at, if we made 20 sales in a month, that was actually pretty good. Now, I don't mind being transparent. At full scale, our goal is to add 3 or 4 new clients a month. Why? 1, we want the right kind of clients. And 2, we can't exhaust our bandwidth of available developers to the point where we can't still take care of our existing clients. So some of that is, like you got to think about, like, it's almost like a negative burn rate in many regards. Now we're an established model. Yeah, we're an established company, but in the beginning, we were just trying to, clients. And we very quickly refined everything from our billing to, all right, well, let's talk about that for a second. How do you collect money and how do you deal with it? Because we were 3 clients in and we were billing people in arrears. And I sat down one day and just did some math. I mean, I'm talking like on the back of a napkin kind of math. And I realized that we were on a trajectory to have $1 million we were going to have to very quickly have to figure out how to finance $1 million or $500,000 to $1 million a month in receivables. And we sat down and talked, and we knew right away we had to change our billing practices because we had to collect money at the beginning of the month that we were about to provide service in. And or we had to go find a way to finance $1 million, which also was a big risk because we could have people tens of thousands of dollars in to our service offering before we realized that they weren't going to pay.
Yep.
So
these are all part of the business model and the plan. You got to understand.
Okay. So before we get into what not to do, and, we're trying to be uplifting and positive about this. So look, by the way, in regards to the series, we're finally getting into the exciting stuff, in my opinion. We weren't trying to be Debbie Downers in the early episodes. I just feel responsible. I actually try to scare people out of starting businesses because I want them to really realize the gravity. Because when it comes to your plan, are you planning, like, what are you getting into? Can you afford to run the business? Because I've had multiple times where over multiple businesses over a decade of starting and owning businesses where I had to stop paying myself to make it, to loosen the burn rate. And Matt, how much in the first 5 years of Stackify, how much salary did you earn?
0. Not at all.
Again?
0.
Okay. All right. So if part of your plan requires that you have to pay yourself to live your life, just give it consideration.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. Just give it some thought. Before we move into the don'ts, I want to go back to the MVP. Like, your plan that's what you should be obsessed with. The MVP and getting it out there. And
the minimum viable product.
The minimum lovable product as well. Like, what do you need to build to make someone love this? And that's like, as viable, making something that's viable and something that people love. I think that can be different, right?
Well, and this comes back to what you mentioned earlier in the episode about the person that spends all their time cleaning the restaurant and never opens the door, right? Like, you got to figure out, like, what is the minimum we got to do to get customers in? Figure out, do they even like our food? And they will buy it before I worry about, buying the best stove and polishing the floor and remodeling the place. And it's like, figure out if somebody likes our food first.
The smartest, most successful, wealthiest tech founders that you can invariably find quotes from all of them on this one. And they say things like, I think it was like Steve Jobs that may have said, if you don't look back at your first product release in absolute terror, like, oh my God, we released that, because it was like so rickety or something, then you waited too long. And I've seen this happen a whole lot. And I've done it myself. We did it with Gigabook. We built way too much shit in there when we should have done what Calendly did, which was just be aces at one thing.
Yep.
And that one thing drove that competitor of ours to a $3 billion valuation recently.
Yep. And
they had the right approach.
If you're solving a unique problem and you reach the right market that's dying to have that product, they will put up with all of your beta crap and all that. Like, I'm using a product I finally found online that had to do with cryptocurrency investing. And after searching forever, I finally found the thing I was looking for. And it's in beta, and it's got some bugs, and it's got some issues. But you know what? I'm their biggest raving fan, and I will go through all of it. I provide feedback. I'm like their QA team because they solved the problem.
The very first paid Gigabook user, after a year, we gave her what we called the golden ticket. Yeah, and because we had other people paying. This is the first year after we actually had revenue. She put up with so much crap. We said, you know what? We're just making your account free for eternity. Thank you. Cause she would tell us. And there was a couple people like that.
Their feedback is so valuable.
It's easy to want to look at those people as being a pain in the butt, but they're not. They're telling you, they're not complaining. They're trying to help.
Yes.
That's the way you got to look at it. And by the way, those people, when you treat them well and you thank them for the input and all that, because as Matt said, it's invaluable. They also become your biggest supporters because they kind of feel an attachment to the growth and the improvement of the product because you're helping. And they also see someone helping them fix the problems that are important to them. With that, there is one thing. Listen for the echo. You can't chase every single piece of input, but when you start hearing the same thing and it sounds like an echo over and over and over, now you're onto something. Well, and now your plan can change, adapt, and wrap itself around. That's a problem we're solving in most cases.
So you bring up a great point we need to cover, and I think this is a perfect time to transition into the what not to do. And one of the biggest mistakes that early startups make is doing too many things, right? Like every customer keeps asking us to do this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And next thing you know, you're doing all these various things, but you're not necessarily very good at any of them. And you may have never perfected what the original goal was, right? Like take Twitter versus Facebook, an example, right? Twitter does one thing really simple. That's the only thing it does. Facebook does all sorts of things, but that doesn't mean that Twitter doesn't still exist, right? Like, to some degree, you have to figure out your business and your model and stay in that lane and not, chasing shiny objects and everybody's feedback and advice for everything.
Well, it's kind of like I mentioned with Gigabook and Calendly. I remember when Calendly came out, we were talking about it. We kind of like it's a joke for us now. We did. We were like, how's anyone going to want to use this? It doesn't even do anything but connect a Google Calendar to a booking link. And that would have been the easier play, but they got really good at that. They got really good at that. Now there's a lot of clients now we kind of pivoted Gigabook our clients and users are people that want something that's highly customizable. Because by the way, we overbuilt it from the beginning. So we have a whole lot of shit in there and we're like, okay, so we built a whole lot of stuff. Who's this going to be good for? And we looked at our users and we asked them, we said, why do you like this? And they said, invariably, it was always one or two weird little things that they could do in Gigabook that they couldn't do in the other platforms. And it was like, and I'll be honest, Matt, almost 90% of 100 items on that list, 90 of those we never would have thought of ourselves. We kind of solve someone's problems accidentally.
Well, so, the flip side of this is, and that gets back to my original point too, is now somebody may sign up for something like Gigabook and they were like, oh my God, this is so complicated. It has all this shit in here. All I really need is Calendly.
Yep.
Right. And that's
where use it.
You get the flip. You get the flip side of it too. And you make your product all complicated and then certain users are going to come in and it's just so complicated. They're like, I need to find something simpler.
Yeah, like Gigabook will help you geofence the potential people that can book your anything.
Yeah,
that's not what things like Calendly do. Calendly is to make an appointment for a 15-minute Zoom call, which Gigabook does as well, but that's also not that advanced stuff, and that's also helped us get enterprise users and a lot of stuff like that. All right, so we're talking about things we don't want to do. As much as we poo-poo the complex plan, don't skip the planning phase. Like, don't just skip it. That's bad. And also don't skip creating basic. And I want to key on the word basic and simple goals.
I think those are the most important things.
5 years from now. Yeah. Like
those are the most important things. And the most important things in the early plan is proving out assumptions, right? Like how much money do I spend on advertising to acquire a customer? How many salespeople do I need for a certain number of customers? How many support people do I need for a certain number of customers, right? Like you're trying to figure out how the business scales and grows and how I have to hire people. How much money do I need? Like you got to figure out all the different levers and how those things work. And you don't have to overly plan those things out because whatever the plan is totally wrong, right? Until you start to go through it. But you need to have some basic goals and assumptions.
I'll give you an example, Matt. Our goal is to acquire one user.
Let's start there.
I'm just saying, like, that's a simple goal. And that's because the thing is if you're like, we're going to get 40% of the market. How about start with one?
Yep.
And look, celebrate these things. And, it doesn't mean you close the business down and go Mardi Gras. style for like a week. Well, you can do that if you want. I don't want to tell you what to do with your life, but but overall, like, celebrate these little wins, because there's a lot of frustrating stuff that comes with a startup and business in general. And it's okay to smell the roses every now and then.
Yep.
And just like, hey, we got $1, like, or got one user, or we launched our MVP, or, and some of those things, like, look, it has to start simple. Your mind doesn't wrap itself very well around things that don't feel like it can grasp. It's like the idea of a diet. People want to lose 50 pounds. How about we start by losing 5?
Yeah, absolutely. And then figure out the next step once you get there.
I started a diet on Monday, Matt, and I've already lost 8 pounds. Can you tell?
No, can't tell. Sorry.
Dang it.
Maybe it's because you're wearing black.
True, though. That's a true story. I'm wearing a Stackify Code-Blooded Killa shirt, actually, which is a primary part of, and for those of you that may see pictures of me or see me on Startup Hustle TV, I have about 7 of these. I don't just wear the same shirt every day. Same with the Respect the Hustle shirts or Full Scale shirts. Yes.
So the next item on our list here is a really good one. Don't undervalue your product or service. And this goes back to as well who your target audience is. So you take Stackify as an example. We had like a couple hundred customers that were paying us $50 a month. They were the biggest pains in the ass in the world. And we did a price change, and quite a few of them left, and then quite a few of them just stayed and started paying more. And if you give your product away for free or it's too cheap, you are going to get the cheapest assholes that are going to use your product. They provide way more. You have to give them way more support. They're a headache, everything about it. Okay. I'm telling you. And people that really care about what you do will pay for it. You can charge them. And the difference to most, especially if it's a corporate, customer that you're dealing with, the difference between $100 and $300 is not much. It's basically nothing. And don't be too cheap or undervalue yourself, charge for what you do.
I talked about that recently. You'll see it on Startup Hustle TV, and I don't mind talking about it, but Hernan of the Business Bros podcast. What's up, Hernan? And if you want a break from Startup Hustle, Business Bros has a lot of great content, but he's got a content creation service he launched. And I talked to him. I was like, dude, you got to raise these prices, because you're going to end up with like a really long list. And he thought about it, called me back the next day. He's like, dude, that's some of the best advice I might have gotten, because you can get too far down that rabbit hole, and then you got to kind of back your way out of it. When it comes to, I think when it comes to things to not do, like, well, don't be afraid of marketing. You gotta get out, you got to try things. I have 3 simple words that should and can define your approach to marketing. Test, test, test.
Yep.
And you can never start testing that too early. And, it's so easy to do that, like in a lot of different forms of digital marketing, and just kind of see what people engage with, what they like. And then you find one that works, and it's really can be a beautiful thing. So, Matt, I think we alluded to this earlier, but don't lose your focus on who your ideal customer is, not who just a customer is. We do that pretty quickly at Full Scale. Like, we know who we want as a client. We know what kind of companies and clients are the most successful with us. And we certainly know which ones aren't.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. You're next.
One of the other items we had in the list here, I think that's actually important, is be really careful if you're starting a new business about using new technology. Using new technology that you're not familiar with or don't know how to use. The last thing you want to do is spend a whole bunch of time learning some technology. Use what's tried and true if you can, right? Like, don't reinvent things that, have to go learn a whole bunch of new skills instead of focusing on your business. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make is they see their new business as also some way to go and learn all these other things, but all those other things are kind of distracting you away from the business itself.
Well, and some of that too is if you're starting a tech company, maybe don't build your entire platform with something that's brand new, because if it doesn't become, it's just difficult to find people to work on it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like when I talk to people that want to seek my advice, and we're talking about Full Scale. And once again, today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by fullscale.io. Reach out. I'll give you good advice about how to start your tech company. And one of the things that I tell them is, certain types of developers, you're going to pay less. You're going to pay less to get great ones because there's a lot of them. It's just simple supply and demand economics. So, I think a lot of people that want to start a startup go in and overspend. They also underspend.
Yeah, it's both. You see these companies that also raise like $10 million, $50 million, and then they go broke, right? It could be they hired a ton of people, they spent money on a fancy office, they spent all this money on all these things, but they're not growing revenue, they're not getting sales, but they're just spending a lot of money.
And at the same time, you can underspend. And I think don't underspend on talent.
Yep.
It's easy to want to be really cheap. You look at an employee and you're like, this one's half as much as the other. Why?
Yep.
Ask why. It might be a better deal, but it often isn't. Like, you want the best people, especially in the beginning, because that's the foundational elements of your business. And the best people usually come with experience. Don't overpay for no experience. That's one thing you don't want to overspend on. And, in Congress with what we just mentioned, I think that at this point, all right. So when I was 30, I didn't want business partners. Now I'm all for it. I'm like a huge co-founder advocate. I didn't think I needed help when I was younger. I just thought I could do it all. Why would I want to share ownership with someone? Well, there's a lot of reasons you want to share ownership with people. Go back and listen to the episodes about co-founders and finding them. And if you've already been following this series, then you already know. But, doing it alone just means you've got that much more to do. And if you're not good at everything, I don't care if you think you are, you're not.
You got to know
don't do it alone.
Yeah. You got to know what your weaknesses are and find people to surround you to help do those things.
All right. So in lieu of a founder's freestyle today, we're instead going to have a rapid fire approach to helping you understand what some of the common pitfalls are that come with planning for a startup. And maybe you can use some of your planning bandwidth to mitigate the downside of those. Would you like to lead, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most common pitfalls is going to be simply lack of finances, of personal or money you raised from investors, and you can't see your business succeed because you just don't have the funding to do so.
It's going to take longer and cost more.
Yep.
Simply put, that's just something like Matt, I think I see that all the time, every time, and if it doesn't work out, oh, great, you have a longer runway or you made more money. Good for you, but don't go out of business because you were overly optimistic about that. Oh, nothing's going to go wrong. It's because you don't know yet. You don't know. Yeah. Poor business planning in general. And even in the most experienced years of my life, these things still come up. And, it's just like, okay, I'll give you an example. We send a lot of money over to the Philippines because we have a lot of employees there. One thing we certainly didn't give a lot of credence to early was how the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Filipino peso could affect everything we do.
Yep.
And COVID hit and the value went from being in our favor to not being in our favor. And it literally cost us $20,000, $30,000 a month more just to exchange money. And some of that is, and it can really, and now it's going back, it's coming back for us. And I look at it every day and I'm like, yes, please go up. Because that's just like not great business planning. Once again, lack of a proper marketing strategy and lack of a dedicated team to help you. So many early stage businesses they've got all these part-time people. They've got like 9 fractional people involved. And the thing is like 50% of focus gives you 25% of results and all the way down the line. So I think you're better off to have 2 people that work with you full time, like that wake up Matt, as you would say in the past, someone needs to wake up every day obsessed with solving this problem or doing this for our company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there are weirdos that are excited about all of those things that you don't find exciting.
Like accountants.
Yes.
All right. How about fierce competition?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we fought at Stackify, you know, with new competitors, competitors kind of come and go, or people change their business model or pricing, or people just new competitors. Like, you just never know.
I believe it was Ice Cube who once gave the prophetic startup advice of big bank, take little bank.
Yep.
It's true, man. It can happen,
Yep.
That's what you got. That's part of why you got to know your competition. And then I think I know the last common pitfall to expect is you're probably going to grow at a slower pace or rate than you hope for.
And that could kill you because you're not, you're going to run out of runway, or you're not growing fast enough for investors. Some investors are going to look at it and be like, you're just not growing fast enough. It's not attractive.
And it could also create things like down rounds. And I talked to Ryan Larson from Silicon Valley Bank in an episode about that recently as well. And, these are the things is if you were raising at a certain rate, now all of a sudden you get, I've invented a word for this. I call it middling. It's like the worst place to get stuck, in my opinion, because at least if you're failing, you can do that quickly and move on to do something else. But when you get stuck in the middle, it's tough because people don't want to invest. It's just not, I don't know. There's a lot of different problems with getting stuck in the middle. So try to wrap your arms around where that growth speed goes. Matt, anything else you'd like to say on the way out?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that startups make, and I can be as guilty of this too, is you always want to sell your product or service to everybody. And you're much better off actually targeting a very specific group. So when that group comes to your website, they know exactly that you solve their problem immediately, right? Not that like, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm not quite, maybe they cater to this other kind of bigger company or smaller company or this service. I'm just not quite sure they really do what I need them to do, because most people aren't going to call you and find out, right? Yep. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but they're not going to find out. They're just bail. Where if I jump to your website and within the first 10 seconds, I'm like, oh yeah, they solve perfectly what I need. They're gonna buy. And to some degree,
that's part of your brand message too, though. Like, what's the benefit? Yeah. Like, tell me what the benefit is. And at Gigabook, it took us a while, but we finally arrived. Hey, peace of mind. Yeah, people put more value on that. Like, unchain yourself from your business. Terms like that, we found we did way better than a list of features that didn't describe the benefit.
And I got a perfect
Don't be afraid
example.
to typecast yourself. Don't be afraid to typecast yourself.
I got a speeding ticket, and so I was looking for lawyers. And you get a lot of law firms. They don't necessarily say much about that they handle speeding tickets, right? But if I land on their website and that's like front and center of like, yeah, we specialize in speeding tickets, I'm like, all right, found the one.
That's what I need. That's what I need. Did they charge you $600 an hour?
No, they told me they can't do anything about it, I guess, if you speed through a school zone.
Slow down, bro. Slow down. Matt, it was I enjoyed sharing the last 68 minutes with you. This ran a little longer than the normal show, but we're here to get through the real things. So, whether that occurs in 32 minutes or 69 minutes or however long, I mean, I'm committed to that. And I think it is time to say goodbye until part 9 is upon us.
All right. See you next week.